All right, we're joined now by legendary Syracuse broadcaster, one of the best to do it, Mike Tirico. Mike, how are you doing? Thanks for joining us.
Happy Super Bowl week. I hope New Orleans is treating you guys well. It's a great place to have a Super Bowl, and it has the best and worst of memories for Syracuse alums. Losing the Final Four there, but finally winning one in 2003.
Exactly right. Talking about the Super Bowl, what's your pick, Philadelphia or Kansas City?
Well,
Getting right to the tough questions.
yeah, that's all right. Let's start the easy stuff. I've done this long enough to know that picking games is absolutely stupid. Makes no sense. I will say that I think we're in for a really good game because both teams have so many players who played in the Super Bowl 2 years, or in Kansas City's case last year. So sometimes you get a very jittery start to a game with a lot of new players or coaches. None of that here. I think everybody on the field understands what's ahead, and the matchups are really good too. With Andy Reid calling the plays for the Chiefs against Vic Fangio, the terrific, legendary defensive coordinator for the Eagles, and Steve Spagnuolo on the defense going up against Kellen Moore, who's calling the offense for Philly, and he may end up being the head coach in New Orleans a couple of days after the Super Bowl. So I think you've got all the ingredients for what should be a terrific game.
You talked about no jitters, but yesterday when the Chiefs came out, that Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, they're like, yeah, feed me
Yeah,
to the crowd.
exactly.
But then the Eagles come out and Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts are much more straight-faced and a lot more serious. I think this one, they're locked, both teams are locked in, but there's
Yeah.
very different personalities on either side right now.
Well, you nailed it. That's the key. They're both different personalities. So they're both in the character of who they are. And you'll never see Jalen Hurts bouncing off the ceiling and firing up the crowd and with a big ear-to-ear grin on his face. That's not who he is. Even when we meet with them for Sunday Night Football in our production meetings, there's an all-business approach from Jalen that belies most of the quarterbacks in the league. And Saquon, I think, is similar as well. And I appreciate them taking it all in, especially for Saquon, given his path, what he had gone through with the Giants, what this year has been like. It's a pretty risky thing when for the first time you're out on the open market. What if he doesn't go to a place with a great offensive line that emphasizes the run game? It wouldn't be this level of historic season that he's having. So for him, I kind of get it. Just take it all in and soak it in a little bit. It's a long week. It's Monday, and Sunday is a lifetime away. And I think the guys are just now getting used to what the routine is for Super Bowl week because it is different than your rest of the regular season.
NBC isn't carrying the Super Bowl this year, so what's your week kind of look like for the Super
Yeah.
Bowl on an off year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go down and be around for some of the events. NFL Honors has become a real tentpole event for the league as they honor all the stars from the season. Players come in from all over the country, and a lot of the folks who cover the NFL on a regular basis are there. So be there for honors on Thursday and Friday. There are a couple other events in the league gathering on Friday night that I'll be at and be in town Saturday. But I'm going to come home this year and enjoy the game on TV. We do the Super Bowl next year at NBC. So I'm going to come back and just kick back and enjoy and absorb the Super Bowl as it plays out on TV, which I've done a few times, but I've been to a lot of the games. I don't know the count. I think I've been to at least 24 Super Bowls in person, and it's always great. It's the biggest sports day in America, and it's one of those pinch yourself that you're honored to be covering it or be there in the stadium for the game. But I'm going to be sitting back and finding some good food and enjoying the game.
You get a very unique experience as a broadcaster. You get to experience a lot of things that the average viewer and all these fans don't. So on Super Bowl Sunday, what is your favorite part about it?
My favorite part of Super Bowl Sunday is truly America the Beautiful, the national anthem, that stretch, because the players have an inordinate amount of time to be out on the field before kickoff. And you can't help but feel the pressure, the tension, the adrenaline, the passion for football then when it's right there. And both teams are lined up at their sidelines. Everybody's watching, anticipating the kickoff. That's my favorite moment. Those like 5 minutes, you don't know whose life is going to change in a positive way or a negative way. Because no matter what happens on Super Bowl Sunday, that player will have that with them forever. They'll be a Super Bowl champion for life and have a ring, or there'll be a player who was in the ultimate game and came up one notch short. So I love personally, much like right before a heavyweight title fight, which doesn't have the cachet it used to, the two fighters in the ring face to face, ready to start, or the tip off of the national championship game on the Final Fours championship night on Monday. So that's the moment I look forward to the most as we get ready for the game.
A pretty busy guy. Do you really get to just sit back and watch sports nowadays, or you always seem to be covering them?
Not as often as I would like, but I still love the sport, every sport as a fan. And I think that helps me stay relevant to it. You try to do it without rooting for a team other than Syracuse. I tell people all the time, like, how can you not root for a team? No, I root for Syracuse. But that's the school that I went to. That's the program that I'm closest with. That's the one where I say the irrational things about officiating. And that's where I just become a normal fan. But other than that, I can emotionally remove myself, but yet still enjoy the competition, the broadcast, what it means. A lot of my sports viewing, though, is for work. A lot of them you're watching a game on a Monday or a Tuesday to get ready for the next Sunday night. You're trying to pick up numbers, style, ideas, storylines, and all of those things. But even with that volume of consuming football and sports in general, I still love it and still look forward to being in the arena, watching the games, because you get to watch the best in the world do what they do. And there aren't many people in life who get that opportunity to be around truly people in their industry and their field who are the absolute best in the world.
You talked a little bit about prep there. I'm going to hold you to that because everybody knows
Okay.
that Mike Tirico does his homework. That's if you talk to anybody, Syracuse alum, anyone else in the broadcasting industry, you want to be like Mike Tirico when you're doing your prep. But how does that change from a week to week basis? How are you keeping up with everything going on and not only making the broadcast continuously interesting for the viewers, but yourself? Because at the end of the day,
Right.
it's your job and you want to have fun with it.
That's right. I think you hit on a really good point there that our job is to entertain people at times. And if we're not entertained ourselves, then it's certainly going to fall flat. There's no chance of connecting. I think preparation has become a lot harder because now you have to make choices in how you prepare because there's so much content out there. I mean, if you're doing the Super Bowl, here you folks are crushing a whole bunch of interviews that's, just really airing back in a relatively small space with, those who can access your content. And think about the number of people you saw at media at night on Monday night. There's no way anybody can consume all of those interviews. But there's a lot of good content in a lot of that stuff, right? There are stories, and the biggest ones get out because somebody hears it and it gets multiplied and goes viral, right? But a lot of those stories, somebody, I'm sure, interviewed Cam Jurgens from the Eagles. And he probably told something about his life story that hadn't really been out there before and is a really good story. So you've got to be selective. You've got to rely on the places where you've done your research in the past for the best stories. But I find the most enjoyment and fun is talking to players or coaches, and especially the ones who you haven't met before. You always end up getting something new, and curiosity helps be the excavating tool that may find something that maybe nobody's told before, nobody's heard before. So for me, I find talking to new people, finding other places where content is being produced, not just the regular standards that I go to, keeps it interesting for me and hopefully in turn for the viewer or listener, depending on what we're doing.
Somewhere you can meet a lot of new people is the Olympics, people from all over the world. Tell me about kind of going through the day to day. I mean, you're on all the time, all hours of the day, covering all sorts of types of sports and events. How do you kind of keep grounded and centered on what you want to do as a storyteller, but also recap the events and maybe even sports you don't know as much about?
Yeah, it's a good question because it's a different animal, right? Think about so many of the sports and how different they are relative to the sports we cover on a regular basis. So sometimes you have to think about, okay, do I have to explain this? Do I know the terms, learn the terms so you can have a conversation with an expert, but also be ready to, I don't want to say dumb it down, but explain it in the simplest terms to somebody who doesn't know much about biathlon or monobob, right? These sports that you never watch except when somebody's representing their country and it's on during the Olympics. So it's an interesting balance back to the preparation portion of this, where I'll try to prepare more granular, in-depth stuff if I'm calling the game or calling the action. But let's take bobsled, okay, in the Olympics. Lee Diffie is our announcer. Lee has all the detailed, focused stuff. For me, it's how do we explain it? How do we explain what the difference between the two-person and four-person bobsled is? What's the historical context? How good has America been? Are there great Americans? What are we expected to do? So we really have to frame the event. So as you're about to invest the only 10 minutes for the next 4 years that most people are watching bobsled, they know what they're watching and what's important. So like, hey, we US should win, or no, we have no chance of winning. And if we do well, that's a big, big story, right? So those are the things that you kind of do with the Olympics that are different from, okay, the Eagles are playing the Chiefs. I need to know what's the matchup inside between the center and the two guards for Philadelphia and Chris Jones for Kansas City. So the Olympics really make you exercise a different muscle, and that's a fun thing to do. And you hit the other key part, the global nature of it, the geography, the world of cultures. And what I get really, they say Pollyanna, but I get still emotional about is that right now there's somebody training in the farthest reaches away from New Orleans right now in Asia. They're training to try to win the same gold medal that somebody in Salt Lake City is training for right at this very moment. That's powerful, right? That's really cool. And you only get one shot. It's every 4 years, and you get one shot to do it. And if you don't, you may not get another chance because the Olympic cycle goes and you may be aged out as somebody better than you comes along. So that's what I go on and on about the Olympics, but it is so unique. And you bring up such a great question of why the Olympics resonate with so many people, even non-sports fans.
Speaking of it being every 4 years, the amount of pressure that these athletes feel when they're there, much like the Super Bowl, this is a once in a lifetime experience for a lot of them, and very few at that. So that mental side of things, the NFL has been prioritizing it a lot in the last few years. How do you think that has benefited the Chiefs because they just keep coming back to the Super Bowl? Do you think mental
Yeah.
health could be one of the keys to their success?
I think mental health in terms of each individual is such a very different topic that it's hard to say, yes, the mental health approach of Kansas City's has been a difference maker. But I will say the environment in which they work is a huge part of that story. And a lot of that is the mental approach. Being around them, we see them 3 times a year. So I've had the great fortune throwing a few playoff games. I think of doing 11 Chiefs games in the last 3 years. And being around Andy Reid and knowing Andy for all the way back to his Philadelphia time, plus being around Patrick Mahomes, being around their ownership and Clark Hunt, they are very conscious of the attitude and approach that they have in that building. It's good humor. It allows creativity. I'll give you an example of that in a second, but it also creates an atmosphere where it's fun to come to work. And I think we all love that. Look at you two right now. I mean, here you are. You can be sitting in a class on a Wednesday in Newhouse too. Instead, you're sitting in New Orleans talking about the Super Bowl, right? It's fun. So it just changes the whole energy of everything you do. Let me give you a quick story about the Chiefs and why, if you watch the game on Sunday, you'll see Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce work at a different level than maybe other quarterback, receiver / tight ends do. So in practice in the NFL, they have different periods, offense and defense. So the offense gets the main focus of the work, and then the defense gets the main focus of the work for the starters. And the backups provide the other side of the field, offense or defense. So when the defense of the Chiefs is doing their work, a few of those periods in practice, which goes 6 to 8 minutes, and there may be 12 or 13 in a practice, depending on the length of it, Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce go down to the other side of the field, and they'll kind of work on some concepts of how do we do this the same way but make it look different? How do we add one wrinkle here or there? And that's a little bit of their magic. When they're out there, Patrick knows when Travis is going to go this way and not this way. Why? Because he's watched him do it 1,000 times, and he knows if he sinks his hips or bends his knees a certain way, he's going that way. So they have this own unspoken language with each other that's unique, right? That's only apparent because the atmosphere created is one of being a creative incubator. And that's a positive mental approach to the sport, not just, no, I'm the coach and we're going to do it this way. So when you talk about mental approach to the game, Kansas City makes it exciting to come to work every day since these guys do this. And I think that's part of why their success is sustainable. And it's not, oh, here we go again. We're going to run the same play for the 83rd time, and I'm sick of it. And that takes an edge off. It keeps an edge. So the mental approach to this Kansas City team is part of the reason that they keep coming back at great successful levels.
Talked about getting to hang out and interact with so many different people. Is there one person or maybe a couple people or players that are just really different than what the casual fan might expect them to be like?
Hmm. Good question. Really good question. Different. Um, no, I'm going through the quarterbacks because we meet with the quarterback almost every week, and the quarterbacks are really the leaders. They're thoughtful. I'll give you one generalization, but it's true over and over and over. The best production meetings for us when we go in to do a game are usually the offensive linemen. And they're usually the last person we talk about in a game, but especially the center. The center gets up out of the huddle and he's looking at, believe it or not, what's the secondary doing? How is the front lined up? Where's the linebacker? You hear a lot of, if you watch a football game, 32 is the mic, 53 is the mic, right? A lot of that is the quarterback working in concert with the center. So the center's got to know all that, all the intricacies of the offensive line. And these are big 320-pound guys who physically push against another 320-pound guy and roll around in the dirt and get up and do it again. They'll do it 80 times a game. But they're usually the guys with the best personalities. They don't get the microphone in their face all the time. They're great storytellers. And they're the ones who give you real insight into a team because that offensive line has to work together, right? You two had to come up with a plan for this interview because you're doing a tandem interview. But think about every single play, those five guys on the offensive line have to work in tandem. So that begets what? Their communication skills, whether it's what we're doing or listening to what we're doing and processing and executing and inputting, they have great communication skills, but they never get to show them off because we always want to talk to the quarterback or the running back. So from a production meeting standpoint, if you sat down with more offensive linemen at SU, in college football, but certainly in the NFL, you're going to find maybe the best storytellers on a team. And that's what we look forward to. We try to get an offensive lineman whenever we can. And talking to Joe Tooney of the Chiefs, Jordan Mailata from the Eagles, in the past, Jason Kelce, when he was with Philadelphia, those were some of the best visits we have. Chris Jones of the Chiefs, their defensive tackle, is one of our best production meeting visits as well. So big personalities to the big people who don't often get the headlines.
I got to speak with Tooney last night, actually.
Okay.
I spoke with him about the comparison of playing for Mahomes and with Brady because I'm a Patriots
Great.
fan at heart. So all the GOAT talking, he's a Kansas City fan. So we've been butting heads a bit on that.
Perfect.
This week.
Perfect. But what a great lesson that is. Like we're all from somewhere is a line my pal Scott Van Pelt uses a lot. And your knowledge of New England kind of takes you to a really cool storyline that's a comparative of these two guys. And we've asked Joe the same question when he first got to Kansas City, but haven't asked him in the couple of years since he's been there. So good on you for picking that up. And it's a great way to frame a conversation about the game. And he's one of the key players in the game too.
And he's moved around so much on that O-line and has to adjust
Yeah.
too. So he's a real key player for those quarterbacks and protecting them. New Orleans has a wealth of history, and especially in hosting Super Bowls, this is going to be their 11th one, tying them for the most for a city to ever host. But back in 2013, there was this infamous lights out. Where were you?
Yeah.
What was that experience?
I was sitting in the stands with a few folks from ESPN. Susie Culver was one of them. One of our producers, Seth Markman, I believe, was sitting either right with us or right nearby, and somebody else from ESPN Radio as well. And it was bizarre. It was a time when, for ESPN, I was doing ESPN Radio right after the game ended. So I was going to leave early in the fourth quarter because where I had to get to was close by. So I'd leave early fourth quarter, be in position to watch the end of the game, and then go on the air a few minutes after. But it was real uncertainty. I don't think anybody knew. And then, of course, your mind immediately wandered to what is really, is there something nefarious going on, something odd? But yeah, it was one of the many memorable nights or days or moments for me being in the Superdome. I haven't, I don't live in New Orleans, but I've got, four or five things that come right to the top of my head. Being in New Orleans, when they reopened the Superdome right after Hurricane Katrina, we got to do the first game in the Superdome. And Steve Gleason famously blocked a punt that led to a touchdown. They played Atlanta that night, and that gets replayed over and over. Matter of fact, it's the only statue I know of that is based on a block punt in the history of the National Football League. And there's a statue of Steve Gleason outside the Superdome blocking that punt in September of 2006. And then I mentioned the two Syracuse Final Fours in 1987 and then 2003. So there have been a lot of memorable moments in that place. And the lights going out was one of the really, really, really odd ones because everyone was, even now, cell phone communication is so readily available. Your pre X or Twitter or Blue Sky or you name it. So there was no other outside source of what was going on. What are they saying on TV? Well, they're saying nothing because they lost the booth communication also. So yeah, I hadn't thought about that day in a while. And I think if you think back to it, it probably had a little bit of terrifying at the base of it and not sure what was going on at that point. But it's quite a moment right in the middle of the two brothers going at it.
So how often do you get to come down to New Orleans, and what are some of your favorite things to do here?
Yeah, so it's been a while because the Saints haven't been all that good the last couple of years. Definitely the Drew Brees era, we were down there a lot, maybe two, three times a year to do the Saints, whether it was Monday night or the back end of the Brees run spilled into my time at NBC with the Sunday night crew doing the pregame show. It's one of the great restaurant cities. It's one of the most unique cities. It has a lot of culture, a great tie to the history of the U.S. and France as well. Great French culture, cuisine, all of that. For college students to go see Tulane's campus, which is just right next door to the Garden District. It's really a cool, unique spot. The old houses and massive trees in the Garden District stick out. Everybody goes to Bourbon Street, and you get to a certain age where you shouldn't go to Bourbon Street anymore. You guys are not of that age, so see it and check it out. It's fun. I'll never forget seeing Jim Boeheim. You guys have probably seen the hat of Jim Boeheim, that big orange cowboy hat for the national championship. He got that hat. That hat was given to him on Bourbon Street that night in 2003. So remember that for a lot of times. There's one place in New Orleans that I want to say very few people go, but certainly not at the top of folks' mind. That is an unbelievable stop. That's the World War II Museum. It opened there probably 2014, 15, something like that. It's one of the more incredible museums in the country. Really done well and tells a riveting, unforgettable story about the U.S. and World War II. And a lot of folks in New Orleans, including the Saints, were very instrumental in getting that thing open and done. And I would tell people who go down to New Orleans, that's a must stop along the way as well to make the trip down.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to explore the city, and we've gotten a little bit, we've gotten some taste of it so far. Last night was a late
Yeah.
night, so I was a little embarrassed by us, but we ended up getting Italian food because that was all that was open at that time.
Okay, there's always good food in New Orleans. You just need to check out the great places. You've got to get to Cafe Du Monde at some point and have a beignet because they are unique and different. And you've got to get down there just to check it out before Friday or Saturday because it'll be nuts probably in the next 36 hours. New Orleans is the city that, because of the walkability and because of the constant party, they just have like the Mardi Gras mode. They just flip the switch and Final Fours, Super Bowls, Sugar Bowls, national championship games. They get right back in that mode. So it's a great opportunity. It's a great place. And as I said a few times, it's a place near and dear to the heart of the Orange family. So enjoy and be happy to tell them, hey, we won the championship here in 2003.
Sounds good, Mike. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Congrats to you guys. Really enjoy the chance to be with you and enjoy the experience down there this week.
Appreciate you. You as well.
Thanks.